Hello there, how are you doing this evening? Morning, whatever, either way. So yeah, first thing I want to talk about, I've changed the name of the show to An Evening with Malapropism, as in a sort of allusion to my names that I use, such as Malapropism, Facebook it, or MySpace it, doesn't really matter. Anyway, so how are you doing? You just saw my underwear. High five. Like I just said high five, I gave you a thumbs up. Does that mean I say thumbs up now? Anyway. So, what are you up to in this lovely evening, or morning? Well, it's evening for me. Well, technically it's the morning. It's about like 1:41. Anyway. Do you like how I do that recurring thing where I look at it and yet all I really have is a wristband on my arm? I don't know. I have two wristbands on my arm. I was making out with a girl one time and she accidentally tore this off. And I was like, no, how could you tear it off? And so she tied it back on. And that was about 2 years ago, and it still hasn't fallen off. Wait, no, today's February, not today. This month is February, which means it was 3 years ago by now, I think. 2, 3, 1, doesn't really matter. Did I just touch something? Oh, it's over now. Anyway, so yeah, how are you doing? What are you thinking about today? I don't know about you, but on the ride home today, I was actually listening to radio, and I love listening to public radio because they have such amazing ideas, and they have such amazing people on there. They talk about things that you really don't listen to or hear about that often. And the thing that we're talking about today was actually the two-state solution. And the guy was actually saying something very interesting, saying that strategically speaking, right now, we should not agree to a two-state solution, because Netanyahu actually wants a sort of apartheid two-state solution, which would only not really solve the problem, if you think about it. So yeah. So the guy was suggesting that actually right now there should be a binary state over, and because that way it will at least allow the discussion for a two-state solution to keep going. So yeah, and I thought that was very interesting. I know very little about Israel and, well, really the rest of the world. I have a small overview of it. I mean, if you were to say dictator, I could at least, point to some countries where there were dictators in the past few years. America? No. I guess he was an elected dictator, as one might call it. I don't know. But I was actually, there's a book that was recently being discussed over saying that since the 1950s, or ever since World War II, the executive branch of the American government has been growing ever more increasingly powerful. And the reason why that was due to bombing powers, or tower power? I don't know. But bombing powers, saying that the ability to drop bombs is different than the ability to go to war. And I actually thought that was completely inaccurate, because presidents, or at least the executive branch of government, has constantly been overstepping its bounds. It's not like it just happened overnight since World War II ended, because really, if you think about it, there have been no declarations of war since World War II, and that was even before the Gulf of Tonkin Act in 1968, I want to think. But anyway, now, if this just goes to what I know, the first executive branch officer who actually overstepped their bounds was President Abraham Lincoln for suspending habeas corpus, and people always like, oh, Lincoln was great, he freed the slaves. Well, yes, that's great, I completely agree with freeing any slave at any time, in any period, and anywhere, but at the same time, you do have to question, are the means to get to this goal really worth it? And to me, I would much rather have slavery than no right of habeas corpus. But then at the same time, I think that habeas corpus should always apply to slaves and all citizens or all people. But actually, that actually brings up another interesting point that we were discussing in my sociology class, that the idea of citizenship is fairly new, at least to the human species. It's only been around for a couple hundred years. Because really, when there were monarchies, and monarchy was the established or usual form of government in the world, it was, people were considered subjects, not citizens, and we didn't have rights. We had, what was the word that they used? something along the lines of, the king wills it. So therefore, that also is another form of apartheid. But then again, there's always been certain classes in society that have certain rules apply to them and certain rules not. So it's always an interesting dichotomy going on with that. But what else was going on that was rather interesting as well? The teacher also brought up another interesting fact, because I always believe that there's, when it comes to controlling parts of the government or a country, it's always, there's a political party and then there's a military party. And these two parties, they can kind of intermingle and such. But my teacher was actually suggesting that really it's always the military party that's in control, which makes kind of a lot of sense, because if you look at it, Barack Obama is actually the first president in a long time who didn't serve in the military. At least I don't think he served in the military. I'm not sure if Bill Clinton served in the military as well. Same for Carter. But, what's his name? Kennedy definitely did. So, high five for Kennedy. Thumbs up, too. So anyway. But no, yes. What was I going with that? Yes, military people controlling everything we do. I've always kind of thought of it as, military people just kind of use. But no, it does make a sort of sense, with Julius Caesar, and who else was there? There's Pompey, and who was the third member of the Triumvirate? I don't really remember. I'll just guess Gaius or Brutus. I want to guess one of them, but I can't. Scipio, maybe? I don't know. But yeah. So it was kind of an interesting thought, because I've always thought of, military people being used by the political elite to control unwashed masses. And it's always interesting when you hear an idea that's different than yours, and you try to look for a way to modify it so that way you can combine the two ideas together. And it's always interesting when you can't, and it's just like, the other idea is completely right, and you're just completely inaccurate and wrong. But perhaps we're all wrong, and really, sociology and history is always a work in progress. So I guess that's where I'll leave you off today. Work harder.